Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for another of our interviews as part of our IPA in Conversation with interview series, where we are looking at the impact of the COVID pandemic on publishers all around the world. I trust that by now you will have been able to watch some other of our interviews. In any case, I invite you to go to our website for a lot more information about how publishers around the world are responding to this pandemic. Today, it's a real pleasure to speak not with one, but with two remarkable leaders of publishers' associations of a sometimes overlooked but very important region of the world, Oceania. Julia Marshall, President of the Publishers Association of New Zealand. Kia ora, thanks for joining.
Kia ora, Hugo.
And Lee Walker, President of the Australian Publishers Association. Welcome and thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Hugo.
So I have a set of questions here for you, and if that's okay with you, Julia, let us start with you. I understand April was a tough month since books were not included as an essential item during the highest level of the pandemic. Could you tell us more about what has happened since?
Yes, well, April was, of course, closed in New Zealand, even for online sales.
Even for online sales?
Yes. But since then, sales have started climbing again. In the week, it was heartening for us that in the week before lockdown, sales were up 23% compared to the same week in the previous year. And again, at the end of lockdown, sales were again up 20% compared to the same week last year. But to date, because we had 6 or 7 weeks of no or very low sales, we're still 18% down for the year and overall, but hopefully this all shows that we're recovering a little each week. We can see that the books that were released in April and May definitely got lost and struggle to find visibility. And there is a particular challenge now in New Zealand to get stock into the country, especially with publishers who have warehousing in Australia. Air freight is incredibly hard to get hold of and is expensive. And our piece of water has always been one of the most expensive bits of water in the world. And so books that are now coming by ship. And that means that booksellers are having to learn that orders can take up to 4 weeks.
Oh. So it's on the one hand perhaps difficult, but there are some encouraging figures there. I mean, the recovery of some of the weeks showing much better figures than even the year before, if I understood correctly. So
yes,
that
I think so. And you know, there are a lot of people in the bookshops, which is good.
Ah, that's great to know. So let us then go to Australia. Lee, how important was it to have books enlisted as essential items in Australia? Were sales for publishers still affected?
Yeah, look, it was really very important. You know, for our customers, you know, the act of reading benefits their health and well-being, especially during a pandemic. So that's the message that we were pushing during that time. And especially during that period of lockdown where we were all asked to stay home. For publishers and for booksellers, continuity of business was critical. If books weren't listed as essential, many of our businesses would have been impacted to the point of having to close their doors permanently. And it'd be interesting to know, Julia, the impact of books being non-essential in New Zealand on your bookshops and your publishers, and if anybody suffered that terribly. Sales for publishers was still affected. In the first month, there was actually an uptick. And we were really hopeful, but then sales declined very dramatically from April, I think. But sales are now returning to normal levels. We're not seeing terrific growth on last year, but we're definitely seeing sales return to what we call normal levels, which is really terrific to see.
Yeah, that sounds great, and it also sounds great that you had really books classed as essential items. In so many countries, that was not the case, unfortunately. So the whole publishing chain was really affected in many of those countries.
Yeah, yeah.
And talking about government relief, and if we can continue in Australia, what does the creative sector in Australia need to keep strong through the troublesome times that may follow?
Yeah, so luckily our federal government was really quite, I was surprised, but really quite quick to act with financial subsidies for businesses to ensure their sustainability. So once a business's sales decline by 30% or more in a month, they're eligible to apply for support, and that support was about supplementing staff salaries. In addition to government support, though, many publishers have had to reduce staff hours. Like, I'm still on a 4-day week, not a 5-day week, as a mechanism to preserve that very valuable cash to see us through. A few publishers have had to make some staff redundant. Thankfully, not many, but a few have. And many publishers have implemented hiring freezes. I work for Oxford University Press, so we still have a hiring freeze, and we'll do so until early next year, I think, and lots of other cost-saving measures. What we need to continue to see now that restrictions have eased is a continued uptick in sales. And like I said before, we're starting to see that. And we're starting to see publishers bring their staff back full time, which is fantastic, a really fantastic sign.
That sounds great, and I think it's also encouraging to know that the government did act as it was. I think it was supposed to. I mean, I wish it was the case in Mexico. We haven't had any support here, so it has been tough.
Yeah, I don't know. We would, even as, you know, Oxford is a very large global business, we would have struggled in Australia if we didn't get that support from the federal government.
Absolutely, I can imagine. Well, I can see it in Mexico as well, and we can feel it. And how about in New Zealand? Julia, how important is government relief for publishers in New Zealand? Could you maybe go through the financial situation of an average publishing house? I mean, which are the toughest financial obstacles for publishers?
Well, as in Australia, we had a slightly smaller wage subsidy than the Australians, but we also in New Zealand qualified for a 12-week wage subsidy with that drop in, I think it was 50% for us. Can't remember. And there's another extension of that now, where we have to show a 30% drop in a 30-day period, and then we get another eight weeks of a. Ours was, I think, perhaps a third less than yours in Australia. But you know, that was fantastic, and it was immediate, and the money came straight into the accounts within days. There has been a significant amount of funding available for the arts, and most of that to date has gone to the performing arts because of the where the revenue completely came to a standstill. There's another phase of funding coming through, and we had some good support for the educational publishers who have been, we will hear later, I think, but they've been so impacted in the export educational publishers. And we're also waiting for confirmation that the government support for export and international rights sales will continue at previous levels, and that's obviously critical for our book fair funding.
Yeah, I can imagine, of course.
But your question about the costs for publishers are the same as all publishers. You know, in this time we're trying to weigh up the balance of being brave in our publishing. Personally, we're trying to be, you know, trying not to be risk averse at this time, because it feels like there's only one way out, which is to to carry on.
Absolutely.
But it's that's quite tough, and I think that varies a lot between across the publishing, doesn't it? Possibly the independent publishers can take more risks than the bigger publishers. I'm not sure.
But I fully agree that I think it's important to be positive about all of this. I mean, there will be some positive outcomes. It is a tough situation, but it's important to be positive. So that's the take I have from your words right now. I mean, it's complicated, but we will go through this. So if we stay here in New Zealand, how about booksellers? I mean, I know that the reading average in New Zealand is very high, and this probably has not changed. But have online sales kept in the high, or has influx in bookshops recovered? I mean, you mentioned something a while ago, but
we've just had had the results of a report that we've done for the New Zealand book industry, which showed that there was growth of 6% overall in 2019 on the previous year, and that our online sales are 7% of our overall sales, and that seemed to compare pretty much with the UK, where they had a 14% online sales overall, but that included audiobooks, which we don't count.
Okay.
And publishers have reported a spike in in sales of physical books sold online once we got out of our lockdown, and were able to start selling online. In some cases, up to 30% of sales, which is internationally high.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's across the board. That's an anecdotal. We've had a strong message to shop local from the government and also from our organisations, and so I think that's helping the feeling of New Zealanders that they really do choose who they spend their money with. New Zealand has a full range of bookshops. We've got strong indie bookshops and the family-owned main chain of Whitcoulls and a chain of franchise stores, plus the supermarket discount stores. So we're lucky that we still have that range. Ebook sales dropped last year by 4.5% compared to the previous year. That will probably wipe out again. I think we're seeing, and I'm not sure if this is the case in Australia and the rest of the world, but there are a small number of bestsellers that are doing really, really well, and the mid-list, the quiet mid-list, or the books that need more help, they are struggling. And apparently illustrated non-fiction is also selling well.
But it's interesting to see, and I think it's a trend I've been able to see in other countries as well, how online sales of hard copies of books, of physical books, have increased, which is very interesting.
It was tough for us to see that. I think I can say this, but the book depository and the Amazon sales were still open through the lockdown, even though we were not. And
they were open, but
they were open, and so people, and there was a message, it did say that that delivery was 5 to 7 days, and which was astonishing, because so we did a couple of test orders, in fact, and those books are starting to arrive now. But those books obviously those books lined up at the borders, and could still So I think it is. I think it is the shop local message is an important one for us online and in physical shops.
Yeah, probably also in some many other countries that I've heard also the same message to shop locally. And Lee, do you think it is different in a country like Australia due to the demographic and geographic differences? I mean, Australia is really huge. What do you think? What is the rough split between digital and physical sales?
Yeah, I wish I had stats like Julia does. I don't, but I have some anecdotal evidence for you. So during the last 3 months, you know, our local shops, both our chains and our indies, have been quite magnificent. While some of them or a lot of them have had to close, they still offered phone orders and home delivery services during lockdown. I mean, the community spirit around our bookshops was quite fantastic. But online retailers, for a country as vast as ours, they're really critical. And the pandemic only increased the need and the appetite for buying online. There was a news article last night about, oh, sorry, that's my coffee machine.
No worries. Enjoy your coffee.
Last night about that upward trend in buying online and how people are definitely feeling very comfortable with purchasing anything online now. I think I had my delivery man come every second day at one stage and he knew my name. He'd just say, "Hello, Meg, how are you today?" So anecdotally, online book retailers in Australia have continued to do really well throughout the pandemic. One of our biggest online retailers just had a very, very good time. And they were an absolute source of book buying relief for many of our Australian readers, including me. Yeah, especially when our bookshops had to close their doors during lockdown. So I don't know the split between digital and physical sales. I do expect that online sales will continue to grow. However, and I'm a great advocate for our bookshops, especially our independent bookshops, we do have a really strong, you know, traditional bricks and mortar bookselling industry in this country. We love our bookshops. We're, you know, many millions of us are frequent visitors of our physical bookshops. So I'm here to support them as much as I possibly can.
That's great news, and I fully agree with that. And it's great to know that you have such an important bookstore system in Australia. So that's very important. Absolutely. And thinking about the other side of the publishing value chain and our other very important partner in our business, which are the authors. How do you think authors have coped during the pandemic? Let's stay with Lee now.
Yeah, so I work for OUP, and maybe the pandemic has impacted educational publishers differently to trade publishers. I think from a sales perspective, we've been impacted less. Just on that note, because we're in our low season right now, so the impact definitely has been less for us. But we and our authors have never been so productive and so busy. I'm in absolute awe of our educational authors, many of whom are practicing teachers and had to transition to online remote teaching very quickly. They have done an awesome job. But even at their busiest, they still continue to write for us, and they've delivered on time, which we are so very grateful for. We have incredible, I'm just in awe of teachers, both in Australia and worldwide. The job that they have done over the last few months has just been, you know, it gives me goosebumps. I'm very proud of them. Our trade authors have continued to write, even during these challenging times. I hope they've had a lot more time to be creative. The publishers have certainly not stopped working, and we're starting to see an increase in new releases that were actually held off over the last couple of months, just because we saw that downturn in sales and we didn't want to spoil the impact of, you know, some really great books that are starting to come out now. Author royalties, I'm sure, will be impacted during this period, but I feel, and I know my trade colleagues feel, that this is, it's a blip, it's temporary, and book sales will return to a level of normality, and we're already seeing that. And publishers are starting to reintroduce normal working hours for their staff, which is a fantastic sign. So I was talking to an Allen and Unwin colleague the other day, and he said, we're all back at work, not physically, we're still virtual, but we're all back at work, we're all busy as ever, and we're all really excited about the releases that we're starting to see, you know, appear in the market, including their own releases. So, you know, everybody's feeling quite positive, and I'm sure our authors are too.
Okay, that's really sounds really awesome, and I think those examples you have mentioned of the collaboration with bookstores and with authors are the kind of things we also, as International Publishers Association, are trying to showcase how publishers around the world are collaborating with bookstores and with authors. And Julia, how are things in New Zealand? How are Kiwi authors coping with this crisis?
Well, I think the New Zealand Society of Authors did very well, and the authors set up webinars, and they were really creative in lockdown with promoting books, and there were online launches and those readings, and lots of work from authors. And of course, our Publishers Association in New Zealand is working really closely with the Society of Authors at the moment, because we have a copyright review underway, and so we've really joined forces in a way that we never have before alongside the Copyright Licensing New Zealand. And we were very heartened during lockdown by the attention to copyright, with librarians and bookshops and teachers from around the world writing to us directly, to the publishers. The Coalition for Books set up a list of publishers with special guidelines for sharing online content during lockdown. And so they asked permission. They were very serious in asking permission to read stories online, and the understanding was great. I think that that the readings could only be retained online for a limited period of time. We in New Zealand, sadly, we had a number of key festivals that were going to go ahead. The writers' festivals in Auckland and Marlborough, and three. We have one comic writer who was with his first book, which has taken 3 years to write, and he was going to be at 3 festivals, and they were all cancelled. You know, so that's heartbreaking for a first-time author.
Of course.
And in particularly, and then in New Zealand, we also, right at the start of lockdown, lost a raft of our consumer magazines, including some that are, you know, like The Listener, which is, you know, I don't know, 50, 100 years old. And so that has reduced the amount of book review space further. But as with Lee, I think everyone's positive, and you know, we've all learned all this stuff about how to do, you know, we have many more tools at our disposal now in our promotion of books for authors, and I think they weren't absolutely writing through lockdown, but I think they are again at it, aren't they? Hope so.
Yeah, we hope so, really.
We do. Now more than ever.
More than ever, absolutely. Okay, that's very interesting. So I was thinking that perhaps I might skip to one further question, because I'm aware of the time. And my last 2 questions are I think, well, I really would like to know your opinion on my last 2 questions. So here's a question for both. I've been seeing news reports that state that apparently the countries that have have been better able to manage this crisis are those led by women. In this case, both publishers associations are led by remarkable women. Moreover, as you know, IPA puts a high value on gender equality. In fact, our next president will be a woman. Could you share some thoughts about this with us? I mean, who would like to start?
I can start if you like. I mean, I'm really fortunate enough to have a career that I'm really very passionate about and very personally committed to. And being president of the Australian Publishers Association is a fantastic extension of my publishing profession. And I'm grateful, really grateful to be working in an industry of like-minded people. I think I'm very lucky, who understand the power of words on individuals and communities, you know, intellectually, creatively and culturally. My board at the Australian Publishers Association is incredibly high functioning, and they're very knowledgeable and very experienced and very talented, and it's made up of both men and women. So as a woman, and for me personally, I'm very proud to be part of that collective. So yeah, it's a really hard question to answer because I am just one of many. But yes, gender equality is incredibly important, and we work really hard to make sure that there's a balance on our board, and it's working very, very well. I just happen to be the president, but yeah, collectively we're very powerful. So that's my response to that, Hugo.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight, Lee. What do you think, Julia?
Well, I think in New Zealand we have a lot of, I did a quick tally up, and I think there are a lot of women running both big companies and independent companies. And I think for us in New Zealand, I think our challenge is to increase the diversity of voice in our Publishers Association and in our publishing houses. And we think that we clearly need more work by Indigenous writers in Te Reo Māori. We need original work. And we're also really aware that we need publishing that really responds to the world as it is now, and not to the world as it used to be. So I think that of course gender is important, but I think that the bigger challenge for us is to increase our diversity, and yes, to increase that diversity is our big issue, I think.
The diversity and inclusion. Excuse me, Lee.
I couldn't agree with Julia more. I think the world is very different to what it was only a few months ago. What's been happening in 2020 has been quite extraordinary, and it's illuminated where we need to do a lot more work. Yeah, and diversity is one of those. Is the biggest issue that I think is going to be impacting publishing over the next few years, increasing that diversity, making sure our Indigenous voices are being heard by a much broader segment of our market. Yeah.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that as well. So thank you very much for those valuable insights. That's very interesting. And for my last question, geographically speaking, Australia and New Zealand may be far away, I mean, from other parts of the world, but in a crisis like this, like the one we're going through, I believe we should keep closer than ever. How do you think that the global publishing industry should achieve unity, and what should be the main goals for international publishers in times ahead?
Shall I go on this one?
Sure.
I've checked this with Sam Elworthy, our representative on the IPA.
Great representative.
Yes, and I first wanted to say that the leadership that you have shown, Hugo, is much appreciated, and that is incredibly important, and especially for us in New Zealand with this area of copyright, where we are really, at a crossroads. Just this week, actually, we're waiting to hear from the government. I think that it's not possible for us to have these Zoom meetings with publishers who live in time zones, in the middle of our night. And and I think that without book fairs, I think that book fairs are incredibly important for us internationally to not only for the selling of rights, but also for those relationships and the sharing of experience, and I feel like my Zoom meetings are single dimensions, and I miss the three-dimensional world where you actually can hear what people are really saying. We would like some super ambitious goals for our industry, and I think for us all to unite behind. And I do think that sustainability is one where we all need to just get to grips with what that means for our industry. Mm-hmm. And the other, of course, which we've spoken about, is diversity. So those are the two issues that we would love to unite, and copyright. Those are the three issues that we will unite behind you with.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's I fully agree with that as well. Thank you, Julia. And how about you, Lee? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think the IPA does a tremendous job of bringing country associations together. For a not-for-profit, we have global might, and I'm very proud of that as a president. We have real global might, especially around copyright. That's where my heart is, like Julia's. So, I think our goals as a global association is to make sure that we're looking after our IP, our intellectual property, and also its creators, protecting and promoting them both. Our freedom to publish initiatives, allowing people to write what they want to write and publish what they want to publish, and mm-hmm. get those messages to our communities is so important. So that's what I've been particularly proud of, as a member of the IPA over the last couple of years, that freedom to publish and that protection of the content that we work so hard to create. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think you couldn't both have said better what our goals are in IPA, what we are looking for, what we are day by day working on in IPA, and we need, of course, all the support. We are here to give our members support, but also need the collaboration of all our members, and it's great to know that you're also doing your part in your part of the world. That's great to know. And well, I don't know, these conversations like these made me again feel proud of being a publisher. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julia Marshall and Lee Walker, two remarkable leaders of their industries. Thank you so much for joining me for this interview.
Oh, thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Julia. It's been a pleasure. Yes. It's so nice to talk about what we know and what we love.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.